Okay, so I'm gonna ask you some questions, and you can just answer, and we'll just have a discussion. So,
Okay.
um, what's your IQ? No,
0.
0. Okay. Let's see. What year were you born?
1927.
In 1927, in Helena, Alabama.
Yes.
Okay, so like what's the first thing that you remember, like the first recollection or memory that you can think of, that you remember?
Well, I think it was a tornado in 1933 completely demolished our house. Mm-hmm. And after I don't remember who all was in the house, but I can remember a door coming right down in front of me. And then once we got outside and started getting cloudy again like this, a black man grabbed me and took me up to the school, which is maybe a block away, because it was in the country back in those days. And that's some of my earliest memories of.
Your mom and your dad, I know, died when you were young, right?
Yes, my mother was 33, and that was the same year as the storm. She died before the storm. And then I think my daddy died 2 years or 1 year later than that.
Mm-hmm. The time that you were in Helena, do you have any memories or anything about living in Helena or what it was like when you were really young?
Well, I remember they had two railroads that went through the town. One was L&N, I forget the name of the other one anyway. And I remember going down to the depot, some of my earliest memories of Helena.
And you had 6 other siblings, right? So
right.
You were the youngest.
Right.
And how did that all work with your brothers and sisters and everything like that? Like, do you remember any particular adventures or anything? Like, what do you think of when you think of your brothers and sisters?
Well, 3 of us boys were in the orphanage with you, 3 of the youngest, in Talladega, Alabama. And then I think when the tornado came through, this Congressman Oliver came through there, and my sister Maddie must have talked to him, and he and people were really poor back in those days. And he said that she should have his secretary write Maddie Mae and see about getting her a job up there, which she did. And then she got a job in D.C. and she was 23 years old and brought 3 of us boys up to raise us, which she did. I think she did a pretty good job. Mm-hmm. And of course, Connors, he always wanted to be a gangster. I remember when we were in Talladega, he hid underneath the bed one time, because like we were in the top level, but below was a dining room, and Connors had went in and had like a room for sick. The kid got sick, and Connors hid underneath the bed there for a couple of days. Then he came out, and then we went to D.C. and of course we the first year we were in the apartment, and of course in the summertime we'd always go back to Alabama. Alton Great had dairy farm down there, so we loved to go down there because we would produce some fancy free, Mm-hmm. And used to go on a milk route. At least I did go on a milk route with my brother-in-law Grady, mm-hmm. and we delivered milk to homes and also restaurants and wholesale places too. And
so the schedule, like where you would spend the school years with Maddie Mae and the summers in Alabama.
Right, yeah.
How old were you kind of like when that started and when that finished?
Well, let's see. Probably I'd say we started probably around 8 years old. And then, of course, when the war came along, Johnny went to paratroopers, Connors went in the Navy, George went in the Navy. And then in January 45, I went in the Navy. And I went to boot camp in Bainbridge, Maryland for 8 weeks, and then a basic engineering school down in Gulfport, Mississippi, and that was really nice down there. And then I shipped out as a replacement. And after we were at sea for a couple of days, the war ended. So really had a whole shipload of replacements who didn't know what to do with us. So ended up on Okinawa, and I was living with a bunch of Seabees. I was on, and it wasn't assigned to anything. This one guy took me all over the island, took me over to Aishima where my pal was shot. And one day we saw this tent up there had 331st Army Postal Unit. Well, a boy I grew up with in D.C., George Stolz, was in that unit. So I hitchhiked over there another day, and I said, "Y'all have a boy named here George Stolz?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Where is he?" "He's down in the tent sleeping." So one day I woke him up. So I spent a couple of days with him anyway. And then, let's see, trying to remember.
So when did you, were deployed back to the U.S. and got out of the service? Like when did you, because you went in 45 toward the end of the war.
Yeah.
So but you were there in the Pacific for right after the war.
Right. And of course I was in what they call a minority cruise, and you had to stay until you're 21. Of course, the war was over and everybody getting out. And I wanted to get out too, and I couldn't. Anyway, I guess I came home on leave. Went to D.C. and then came back, and I was hoping I'd be stationed on the East Coast someplace, but I wasn't. Then I went to another island down there. In the meantime, I'd been on Saipan and Okinawa, and then I went to this island called Manus. It was in the South Pacific too, and stayed there to balance my military career. And when I got out, I hadn't finished high school before I went into the Navy, so I in Washington had what a Veterans High School Center. So it was in the high school there, and so I went and a bunch of old guys, all just like myself. I was still young, but we had guys in it a lot older than myself, and so I finished up and got my high school diploma. And then after that, I worked for several different places. I worked for Armor Meat Company and worked for the Census Bureau in Washington and some other place. And then a friend of mine, Buddy Washington, lived down about a block from me, but they had a country place down on King Queen County. So we used to go down there fishing one thing. So I was there one day and I met a sweet girl. So we used to correspond and all like that, letter writing. And then after we got married.
Well, let me ask you, so how long did you correspond? Like how long was your courtship, you think?
Maybe a year.
About a year?
Right.
Okay.
And two, we got an apartment building in the same building, apartment more or less I grew up with Madam May, but we're at the other end of the building on the second floor. That's where back in those days, when you moved out something like that, you had to remodel the apartment to suit yourself. So we did. I remember one night, a bunch of kids that were painting and all like that. I remember some white paint. I guess we made a lot of noise. This old lady called the police. So the police came, and this one policeman backed up against his door frame with white paint. But we didn't tell him about it, So we lived there for a while, and then we moved to another apartment up on 14th Street. And
what was it like? That was right after the war. So what was it like living in Washington in the late 40s, early 50s?
Washington was a beautiful southern town, small, and it's really a good city, and it had wonderful transportation. There you could take a bus or streetcar any place and go any place on D.C. And they had an amusement park out not too far from there called Glen Echo. It was in Maryland. And they used to have a pass, I think $1.25 had to buy this pass, and then you could use it, people going to work and all like that. But it expired on a Saturday night, so we would try to get somebody on Saturday night to give us a pass when we'd ride up and down the streetcars, the rest of the day, rest of the evening rather. And but anyway, Washington was really a nice southern town. Here again, at this time, we're still going to Alabama every summer. At least I was.
Right. So then I know you had a family and worked for the telephone company, and you had me, and then you had David, and moved to Virginia. And
yeah, but, I was just lucky. I had applications into Vedco and several different places. So one day I went down to the telephone company, and the guy that did hire and fire, and went to see him. And he says, "No, I still don't have any openings." He said, "Come back, would you like to be in a cable splicing department?" And I said, "Well, I need a job, so anything." So anyway, I went to the telephone company as a splicer's helper, and that would put the wires together, And I worked for a telephone company for like 33 and a half years, and it was, back in those days, really a wonderful company to work for. It was. And let's see, did I get married yet?
Yeah, you got married and everything like that. So let me.
You were married in Richmond at what was the church there?
New
Bridge Baptist Church. Yeah.
All right. Let me ask some different kinds of questions too. Like, okay, so since you were born in 1927, you've been through a lot of history and everything that's happened around the world. So if you had to pick one thing that's happened in your lifetime, like historic event or moment, like what one do you think is the most important? I know that would be hard, but if you could pick one particular one, what would it be and why?
Meeting my wife, meeting Bertie.
That's an historic event?
Yeah.
Okay. I can buy that. Yeah.
And, of course, being in the service too was quite an ordeal, because everybody back in those days wanted to go into the service.
Right. Well, what about now? Like if I put this together, and let's say your great grandchildren that haven't even been born are watching it, what advice would you want to give them?
Well, always be honest and trustworthy, and always tell the truth, and always love.
What do you think, looking back, if you had to pick something that is like the biggest achievement or the thing that you've accomplished in your life, what would you say it would be?
Well, I still have to say married Bertie.
That's good. Okay.
It's the best thing ever happened to me.
Mm-hmm. Right now, if you could go and spend a whole day doing anything you wanted to, and money was not an issue, time was not an issue, even like health, like you could be back in a 12-year-old body or whatever, what you could just pick anything that you wanted to do. what do you think you would do?
I don't know. Say, I've been so lucky. I really have been.
I'm trying to remember the story. You had that little dimple in your head.
Yeah.
What was that?
When we lived in Helene, and I was really young, and so we had a swing on the front porch, and I was on the swing. I vaguely remember this, and one of the, I think it was Johnny, wouldn't let him in the swing, so he went down and got it rocking through it and hit me in the head with that. And I can remember the blood blowing out, but I didn't have to go to the hospital or anything, So this one boy and I got in an argument, and so he had me down on the ground punching me. And so after that, I stopped going to church. Only Wednesday night. Like we're in Talladega, you always get a favorite buddy, and it's one boy I remember. We're big buddies, and his name was Jackie Beadle, I think. And so anyway, the kitchen was downstairs, so he and I, they making Thanksgiving candy or something like that on the table. He and I went in and got a piece of candy, and the lady, she was the preacher's wife, and the preacher ran the institution. And so she made us drink a bottle of castor oil and hold her hands out like that, and she took her laser strap and lay down like that, in her hands. But back in those days, that was punishment,